I still remember the smell of her perfume mixed with another man's cologne. It wasn't how I planned to end my Tuesday. After closing a major deal in Boston 2 days ahead of schedule, I decided to surprise Rebecca by coming home early. 10 years of marriage, and I thought I knew what awaited me in our Chicago penthouse. I was wrong. The elevator doors opened directly into our living room, one of the luxuries I'd worked 80-hour weeks to afford. Everything looked normal: Rebecca's designer handbag on the marble counter, 2 empty wine glasses, music playing softly from our bedroom. I loosened my tie, thinking maybe she was preparing a bath or reading one of her novels. Then I heard it. Laughter. Her laughter, but deeper, more intimate than I'd heard in months. And another voice, familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. "Rebecca," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The sound stopped abruptly. Shuffling. Whispers. I moved toward our bedroom, each step heavier than the last. The door wasn't fully closed. Through the crack, I saw Rebecca's auburn hair splayed across pillows that I had bought during our anniversary trip to Milan. And next to her, Mark. My cousin. The same cousin who had been my best man, who had given a tearful speech about loyalty at our wedding. I pushed the door open. Rebecca's emerald eyes widened, not in shame but in annoyance at the interruption. Mark at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, scrambling to cover himself with our Egyptian cotton sheets. "James," Rebecca said, sitting up, not bothering to cover her bare shoulders. "You're supposed to be in Boston until Thursday." "Clearly," I replied, my voice hollow. The betrayal wasn't just in what they'd done, but in how casually they'd done it. In my bed. In our home. "Mark, I think you should go," I said, surprised by my own composure. He grabbed his clothes, avoiding my eyes. "James, man, don't," I cut him off. "Just get out." After he left, Rebecca wrapped herself in her silk robe, the one I'd given her for Christmas, and lit a cigarette. She never smoked in the house. Another rule broken. "How long?" I asked. She exhaled slowly, the smoke curling between us like another barrier. "Does it matter? 10 years of marriage. I think I deserve some respect and an explanation." That's when she laughed. Not a nervous laugh or an apologetic one. A dismissive laugh that cut deeper than any knife. "Respect?" She flicked ash onto our imported rug. "James, you've been so naive. Mark and I have been seeing each other for 3 years. 3 years while you've been flying around the world, building your precious empire." I stood there, taking in her words, her casual cruelty. Rebecca, with her perfect features and calculating mind, had always been ambitious. I'd admired that about her. Now I realized her greatest ambition had been securing her lifestyle while pursuing her pleasures. "I want a divorce," I said quietly. She laughed again. "Fine. You'll give me half of everything anyway. The house, the cars, the vacation properties. Your lawyer against mine, we both know how that ends." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked to our closet, pulled out a suitcase, and began packing essentials. Rebecca followed, her confidence faltering slightly at my silence. "What are you doing?" she demanded. I continued packing methodically: clothes, passport, the watch my father left me. Nothing else mattered. "James, talk to me. You're being dramatic." I closed the suitcase, looked at her one last time, memorizing the face I once loved, now a stranger's, and walked out without a word. The silence began that night. I had no idea then how powerful it would become. That first night, I checked into the Four Seasons downtown. Luxury had always been my comfort zone, but nothing felt comfortable anymore. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, phone buzzing with Rebecca's calls, which eventually turned to texts. "Where are you? You're being childish. We need to talk about this like adults. At least answer me, James." I silenced the phone and stared at the Chicago skyline. The city lights blurred through tears I refused to acknowledge. I'd built my business on strategic thinking, on seeing 10 moves ahead while competitors saw only 2. Now I would apply that same mindset to my personal life. By morning, I had a plan. My first call wasn't to Rebecca, but to Victoria Chen, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Illinois. I'd met her at a charity gala 3 years ago, ironically, around the same time Rebecca had started sleeping with my cousin. "They always make mistakes in the first 48 hours, Victoria said when I explained my situation. Her voice was calm, clinical. "Don't respond to anything, document everything, and follow my instructions precisely." Next, I called Thomas, my younger brother and CFO of our company. "I always thought something was off with her," Thomas said after I told him. Remember last Christmas when I caught her texting during family dinner? She said it was her sister, but she angled the phone away when I walked past. I need your help, I said. And your discretion. Within hours, Thomas had helped me secure and transfer assets that were solely in my name. By afternoon, Victoria had filed initial divorce papers and secured emergency orders to prevent Rebecca from emptying our accounts, something my wife had already attempted twice, according to the bank alerts on my phone. Rebecca's text shifted from demanding to pleading. James, please, we can work through this. I made a mistake. I love you. At least give me a chance to explain. My silence was my only response. 3 days later, I boarded a plane to Singapore where we were opening a new office. Rebecca didn't know about this expansion. She'd stopped asking about my business years ago unless it involved purchasing something for her. Now, that disinterest would work in my favor. I threw myself into work, extending my stay in Asia, moving from Singapore to Tokyo to Seoul. In hotel rooms across the continent, I rebuilt myself while Victoria dismantled the life I'd left behind. She's getting desperate, Victoria informed me during our weekly call. She tried to access the Cayman account. I had closed it months ago, sensing something was wrong even before I had proof. Intuition, perhaps. Mark moved in with her, Victoria continued. They're playing house in your penthouse, but the utility bills are piling up. The credit cards were declined at Saks yesterday. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pain. Just a hollow space where emotion used to live. Rebecca's social media told its own story. Photos of her and Mark at restaurants I used to take her to. Captions about new beginnings and true love finding its way. The comments were supportive, but dwindling. Chicago's social circle was savvy enough to hedge their bets. 6 weeks after I left, Thomas called with news. Rebecca showed up at the office today. Security didn't let her past the lobby. What did she want? Money, what else? She said the household accounts are frozen and Mark's investments aren't paying off. I almost laughed. Mark had never made a successful investment in his life. His business ventures were thinly veiled gambling operations that inevitably collapsed. She looked different, Thomas added. Thinner, worried. I should have felt something, vindication, perhaps. Instead, I simply nodded, forgetting my brother couldn't see me through the phone. The Shanghai deal is closing tomorrow, I said, changing the subject. We should see a 15% return by quarter's end. That night, in my hotel room overlooking Hong Kong Harbor, I received a final text from Rebecca. I know you think your silence is punishment, but it's actually a relief. You were always so needy, so desperate for my attention. Mark gives me what you never could. I read it twice, then blocked her number. The silence between us was no longer just my strategy. It was becoming my salvation. 3 months into my self-imposed exile, I returned to American soil, not to Chicago, but to New York, where I maintained a low-profile apartment in Tribeca. The distance had given me clarity. While Rebecca had been laughing at my naivety, I'd been building something she never bothered to understand, a network that spanned continents, a reputation that opened doors she couldn't even see. Victoria met me for breakfast at a discreet corner table in the Four Seasons restaurant. Her tailored navy suit and perfect posture projected exactly what I needed, unwavering competence. The judge denied her emergency petition for spousal support, Victoria said, sliding a folder across the table. Your documentation of her affair with your cousin, especially given the family connection, has significantly undermined her position. I nodded, scanning the documents. And the penthouse, listed yesterday, 3 offers already, all above asking price. Victoria's lips curved into a slight smile. The furniture and art will be moved to storage next week, as per your instructions. Rebecca had always taken pride in our home, spending hundreds of thousands on interior designers and exclusive pieces. The thought of strangers walking through, evaluating and dismantling her carefully curated space, would cut deeper than any conversation could. She doesn't know yet, Victoria added. Legal notification will arrive tomorrow. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the information settle. And Mark, that's where it gets interesting. Victoria leaned forward. He's been making inquiries about accessing your family trust. Apparently, he told Rebecca he could convince your grandmother to release funds early. I almost laughed. Grandmother Catherine, with her steel-trap mind and profound distrust of anyone marrying into family money, would sooner donate her entire fortune to charity than give Mark access. There's more, Victoria continued. Rebecca's been calling your clients. 3 so far, claiming she needs to reach you for a family emergency. This was new, desperate and clumsy. The Rebecca I married was too proud for such transparent tactics. Later that afternoon, Thomas forwarded me an email Rebecca had sent him. "I know James is speaking to you. This silent treatment is childish and cruel. The mortgage payment was rejected, and the building management is threatening eviction. Mark says James is legally obligated to maintain my lifestyle during proceedings. If you have any influence over your brother, tell him to stop this vindictive behavior before I'm forced to make certain aspects of our marriage public." The threat was empty. Our prenuptial agreement included a confidentiality clause with severe penalties. Another detail Rebecca had dismissed as boring legal stuff when we signed it a decade ago. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "James." Rebecca's voice was thinner than I remembered, missing its usual confident edge. Finally, I said nothing, just listened to her breathing. "This has gone far enough," she continued. "The house is being sold. My cards are declined everywhere. You can't just erase 10 years of marriage." The irony wasn't lost on me. She had erased our vows with every secret meeting, every lie, every night in our bed with my cousin. "Mark says you're being unreasonable," she pushed when I remained silent. Mark says a lot of things." I finally spoke, my voice steady. "Is he still saying them from my bed, in my house, spending my money?" Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. The power was shifting. "James, please. I made a mistake. We both know this isn't really about Mark. It's about us, our issues." "There is no us," I interrupted. "And soon, there will be no house, no joint accounts, no shared assets. Just silence." "You can't do this to me," her voice cracked. "Where am I supposed to go?" For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love I once had for her. The vulnerable girl beneath the polished exterior who had once captivated me with her emerald eyes and ambitious dreams. "That," I said softly, "is a question you should have asked before you laughed at me." I ended the call and turned off my phone. The next morning, Thomas informed me that Mark had moved out of the penthouse, taking Rebecca's grandmother's silver and several pieces of art with him. The silence was no longer just mine. It was becoming a void that Rebecca couldn't fill with laughter anymore. 6 months after walking out of my penthouse, I found myself in a London hotel suite, finalizing the acquisition of a British tech firm that would expand our European footprint. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city lights into watercolor smudges. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Rebecca showed up at Mom's house today." I stared at the message, feeling a cold weight settle in my stomach. Our mother, battling early-stage Parkinson's, lived in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. She had always been kind to Rebecca, despite her private reservations about our marriage. "What did she want?" I typed back. "Money, of course. Told Mom you'd frozen all her accounts and she couldn't even buy groceries. Mom gave her $200 and called me after." I closed my eyes, imagining my gentle mother, with her trembling hands, counting out bills for the woman who had betrayed her son. The image burned. "Mom's fine," Thomas added, sensing my concern. Said she felt sorry for Rebecca. "She looks like she's aged 10 years, were her exact words. Victoria's update came the next morning via encrypted email. The penthouse had sold for 15% above asking price. Rebecca had been served eviction papers, giving her 2 weeks to vacate. The divorce proceedings were progressing, with a court date set for next month. "Her attorney has requested a continuance," Victoria wrote. Apparently, Rebecca has parted ways with her previous counsel due to financial constraints, and is now represented by Alan Decker. Decker was known for taking high-profile cases on contingency, gambling on big settlements. A desperate move that told me everything about Rebecca's current situation. I returned to Chicago for the first time since discovering the affair, staying at Thomas's downtown loft rather than a hotel to avoid being spotted. The city felt both familiar and foreign, like a recurring dream with details slightly out of place. "You should see her Instagram," Thomas said over dinner. "It's getting weird. All these philosophical quotes about forgiveness and growth. Photos of her at charity events, but you can tell they're old pictures. The social circle has pretty much frozen her out." I hadn't looked at her social media since leaving. Now, curiosity pulled me in. Rebecca's once pristine feed of designer outfits and exclusive restaurants had transformed into desperate positivity and vague references to personal challenges. Her follower count had dropped dramatically. The next day, against Victoria's advice, I drove past our old building. A moving company was loading boxes into a truck. And there was Rebecca, supervising in jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from the woman who once refused to wear anything without a designer label. Her auburn hair, previously maintained with weekly $500 salon appointments, was pulled back in a ponytail, the color dulled. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. For a moment, our eyes met through the car window. I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by something that looked like shame. Then anger. She started toward my car, but I drove away, heart pounding as if I'd seen a ghost. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. "James, I know you're in town. We need to talk face to face." Mark took everything when he left: jewelry, art, even the emergency cash I kept in my desk. "I'm staying at the Marriott on Michigan Avenue. Please, for the sake of what we once had, give me one conversation. Rebecca." I forwarded it to Victoria without responding. The court date arrived with Chicago displaying its finest autumn colors. I entered through a private entrance, as Victoria had arranged. The courtroom was nearly empty, another strategic move to minimize gossip. Rebecca entered with Alan Decker, her appearance shocking me despite Thomas's warnings. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a modest black dress that hung loosely on her frame. The confident stride had become a hesitant walk. The emerald eyes that once flashed with ambition now darted nervously around the room. When she spotted me, she straightened slightly, lifting her chin in a ghost of her former pride. I maintained my expression of polite indifference, the same face I used during difficult negotiations. The proceedings were brief and clinical. The judge reviewed our prenuptial agreement, noted the documented infidelity, and approved the settlement Victoria had crafted. Rebecca would receive a one-time payment, generous by legal standards but a fraction of what she'd expected. No alimony, no property, no ongoing financial connection. "Your Honor," Decker began, "my client contests the validity of the prenuptial agreement on grounds of—" "Mr. Decker," the judge interrupted, "we've reviewed your filing. The agreement was properly executed, with independent counsel for both parties. Ms. Wilson's signature appears on every page, along with her attorney's. The court finds no basis for invalidation." Rebecca's face crumpled briefly before she composed herself. As we rose for the judge's exit, she turned toward me, eyes pleading for acknowledgement. I gathered my papers and walked out without a word, the silence between us now legally permanent. 1 year to the day after I walked out of my penthouse, I stood on the balcony of my new home in San Diego, watching the Pacific Ocean catch the last golden rays of sunset. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, the paperwork filed away in some courthouse archive, our 10-year marriage reduced to legal terminology and settlement figures. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas: "You see the news about Mark?" I hadn't. A quick search revealed that my cousin had been arrested for investment fraud, a Ponzi scheme that had collapsed spectacularly, taking the savings of several Chicago socialites with it. The article mentioned he was facing up to 15 years if convicted on all counts. I felt nothing but a distant pity. Mark had always been chasing shortcuts, looking for the easy path to the wealth I had built methodically over decades. In Rebecca, he'd found someone equally attracted to the trappings of success without the discipline to earn it honestly. Speaking of Rebecca, I hadn't heard her name in months until Victoria called the following morning. "She's trying to sell her story to Chicago magazine," Victoria said without preamble. "A tell-all about your marriage and divorce." "Let her," I replied, surprising myself with how little I cared. "The confidentiality clause, already handled," Victoria interrupted. I sent a cease and desist. The magazine dropped it immediately. They don't want the legal headache. After we hung up, I found myself searching for Rebecca online again. Her Instagram was gone, but a LinkedIn profile appeared, showing she'd taken a position as an event coordinator at a mid-tier hotel chain. The woman who once refused to stay in anything less than 5-star accommodations was now organizing corporate retreats and wedding receptions. Life had a particular kind of poetry sometimes. That evening, as I prepared for a video call with our Tokyo office, my security system alerted me to a visitor. The camera showed a delivery person with flowers. I almost declined entry, but curiosity won out. The arrangement was elegant but modest, white lilies and blue hydrangeas. The card simply read, "I'm sorry for laughing. The silence has been deafening." I placed the flowers on my kitchen counter, staring at them as if they might explain themselves further. After a moment, I took a photo and sent it to Thomas. Rebecca, he texted back immediately. Apparently. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? The anger that had fueled me through those first months had burned away, leaving behind something cooler and clearer. I wasn't the same man who had walked in on his wife's betrayal a year ago. That man had defined himself through Rebecca's eyes, measured his worth by her approval. This version of me, the one who had rebuilt his life across continents, who had found peace in solitude, owed nothing to anyone, least of all responses to belated apologies. I picked up my phone and typed out a reply to Thomas, nothing. 2 days later, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. James, I don't know if you got my flowers. I understand if you don't want to respond. I just needed you to know that I recognize now what I threw away. The silence between us, it was funny to me once, when I thought I held all the power. Now I understand it was your strength, not weakness. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. Just acknowledgement that what we had was real, even if I destroyed it. Rebecca, I read it twice, then closed my laptop without replying. Some silences needed to remain unbroken. 3 months later, I was in New York for a board meeting when I spotted her across a crowded restaurant. Rebecca was dining with an older couple, perhaps clients for her new job. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes simpler but elegant in a way her designer wardrobe never quite achieved. She was laughing, but it wasn't the cruel laugh I remembered from our final confrontation. It seemed genuine, perhaps even humble. For a moment, our eyes met across the room. A flash of recognition, a slight nod from her, neither friendly nor hostile, just acknowledgement. I returned the nod and turned back to my dinner companions. Later that night, in my hotel room overlooking Central Park, I realized something profound had shifted. The silence between us was no longer a weapon or a shield. It had transformed into something else entirely, a completed chapter, a closed door, a lesson learned. I thought about contacting her, perhaps offering some word of closure. But what would be the point? Some stories don't need epilogues. Some silences speak volumes on their own. Instead, I opened my laptop and focused on the future, a new acquisition in Europe, expansion plans for Asia, a clean energy initiative I was passionate about. The life I had built from the ashes of betrayal was fuller and more authentic than anything I had known before. Rebecca's laughter had once cut me to the core. Her silence had once seemed like freedom to her. Now, we both understood the truth. Respect couldn't be demanded, only earned. And silence wasn't the absence of communication. Sometimes, it was the most powerful message of all. I closed my laptop and watched the city lights, feeling at peace with the quiet.